At the start of the film, Father Barrow is shown preparing for an exorcism in a house. A priest arrives and informs him that Father James is calling for him inside if he is ready. The priest then leads Barrow upstairs to where a pregnant woman, in need of exorcism, is located. After leaving Barrow there, the priest departs, leaving him in a hallway filled with eerie demonic voices emanating from a room. Barrow notices photos of the possessed woman's family on the hallway walls before entering the room. Inside, Father James has already begun the exorcism. The woman is fully possessed, her body marked with numerous wounds. The demon struggles fiercely, emitting strange and unsettling sounds. Father James warns Barrow that the expulsion state is imminent and instructs him to prepare the coach's box. Upon seeing the coaches, the demon pleads with Barrow in the woman's real voice, claiming that she is about to give birth and begging him to release her. Moved by pity, Barrow begins to untie her but suddenly remembers she is possessed and stops. The demon, however, manipulates him again, and this time Barrow unties her legs. Realizing his mistake, Barrow becomes furious, but before he can react, the demon breaks free and attacks him, calling him a fool. Just as the demon is about to inflict further harm, Father James intervenes, grabbing the woman. In the struggle, both Father James and the woman fall out of the window to their demise. Overwhelmed with guilt and grief, Barrow is devastated, knowing that 3 lives were lost because of his actions. The woman's husband then enters the room and confronts Barrow, demanding to know what he has done. In the following scene, Barrow is shown inside a van, being transported to a Catholic mental asylum. Upon arrival, he is confined to a cell where Chaplain Davies visits him. Davies explains that, at Barrow's request, he has been sent to the asylum instead of prison. He then hands Barrow a notice stating that the Vatican has revoked his status as a priest. Davies also mentions that he is retiring soon and invites Barrow to join him for the church retirement ceremony. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Molly Hartley, who is celebrating her 24th birthday with her friends. She is also marking her promotion to an official partner at the firm where she works. During the celebration, Daryl's friend Lydia arrives, and Molly, clearly drawn to her, whispers something in her ear. The two then begin dancing together. Later, while Molly is in the washroom, Lydia and Daryl join her, and Daryl offers her some blue pills, which Molly takes. After this, they return to dancing, and the atmosphere becomes increasingly intense as all 3 begin kissing each other. Molly's friends, concerned for her, urge her to go home, but when she refuses, they eventually leave without her. Later that night, Molly arrives home with Lydia and Daryl, where the two start getting intimate in front of her. Molly, feeling drawn in, becomes seduced by the situation, and at Daryl's prompting, joins them. The next morning, Molly is awakened by a knock at the door and finds 2 police officers standing outside. They inform her that a neighbor has filed a noise complaint. Molly explains that she was celebrating her birthday, but the officers begin searching her house. To her shock and horror, they discover the corpses of Lydia and Daryl, the 2 friends she had been with the night before. Molly is immediately arrested and taken in for interrogation, leaving her bewildered and terrified as the reality of the situation unfolds. During the interrogation, Molly begins hearing strange voices and insists that she didn't commit the act. As the voices grow louder, her tone suddenly turns demonic and claims it's not her, but a certain they who had done it. When the female officer approaches her, Molly's nose starts bleeding. The demon declares that they are here before the scene abruptly cuts. We then see Molly in a van, being transported to the same Catholic mental asylum where Barrow is held. Meanwhile, Barrow and Chaplain Davies are shown praying in the church. Davies shares his plans for retirement, mentioning that he will enjoy teaching at a local seminary, and invites Barrow to join him once he is released. After Davies leaves, Barrow is stunned to see the cross on the wall turn upside down, a chilling and ominous sign. Back at the asylum, Molly is brought to the receptionist, who calls her by her full name, Janet Mary Jones, in a demonic voice. Janet notices Molly's completely white eyes and begins hearing eerie sounds, which terrify her. She momentarily regains her composure when a guard calls out to her, assuring them she is fine. However, the tension escalates as her cup of tea suddenly explodes, prompting her to urgently instruct the guards to take Molly away. After this, as Molly is being taken to her cell, the other prisoners in the hallway begin behaving strangely, as if sensing something unnatural. Later that night, Molly hears scratching and grunting noises coming from inside her cell. She feels drawn to the drain hole and, lying near it, listens to the voices emanating from it. In a demonic tone, she declares, "We are getting stronger." In the next scene, Molly is shown sleeping on her bed when an insect crawls out of the drain hole and enters her nose, causing her to wake up abruptly. Something unsettling happens to her, and she begins screaming for help. The voices she hears grow louder and more intense, overwhelming her. The following day, Dr. Laurie visits Molly in her cell and informs her that they will meet several times a week for evaluation. Laurie emphasizes that Molly needs to cooperate so she can provide effective counseling. Molly insists that she is not insane but possessed, warning Laurie that she has no idea what she is dealing with. Suddenly, Lori's file flies into the air, scattering its pages everywhere. Molly coldly mentions that she had a counselor like Lori in high school who has now passed. This unnerves Lori, who quickly exits the cell. Lori then reviews Molly's past records and discovers disturbing details. She learns that Molly's high school counselor, Dr. Emerson, and her boyfriend Joseph were involved in the occult. Both were found lifeless in a bizarre double self-termination shortly after Molly escaped from their cult and moved to Michigan to start a new life. Lori also comes across photos of Lydia and Daryl. Next, we see Janet reading prayers with a prayer card in her hand, while Molly sits silently in her cell. Suddenly, Janet's card catches fire, and she fearfully exclaims that Molly brought him here and that they need to do something about it. When a guard goes to check on Molly, she stares at him with an eerie, unsettling gaze. The following day, Lori visits Molly and tries to gain her trust, expressing her desire to understand the occult and assuring Molly that she wants the best for her. However, Molly remains silent before suddenly roaring loudly. She then vomits on Lori and chillingly says her master says hello, before letting out a blood-curdling scream. The scene shifts to Barrow, who is praying in the church. Molly, seemingly disturbed by his prayers, demands that he stop. She then begins violently banging her head against the wall. A guard calls for Dr. Lori, who arrives to find all the patients in the asylum banging their heads against the walls. Lori rushes to Molly, who has injured herself, and pleads with her to stop. Outside the hospital, a swarm of ravens gathers, adding to the ominous atmosphere. Molly is then taken to a secure room, growling in a strange, inhuman manner. As she passes Barrow's cell, he hears her voice and comes to the door, locking eyes with her as she is led away. In the secure room, Lori attempts to talk to Molly, referencing her case file. She mentions that Molly claimed to be possessed by the devil on her 18th birthday, which she believed was her first phase. Molly had quoted Dr. Emerson, who told her she would be the one to bring Satan back to the mortal world. Lori asks Molly if this is true, to which Molly responds cryptically, comparing her possession to a pregnancy that would come to term in her 24th year. When Lori questions why the possession would need to incubate from 18 to 24, Molly reveals it is precisely 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days. Lori notes that there are still a few days left for this period to complete. Suddenly, Molly begins to convulse, trying to say something incomprehensible before fainting and whispering that someone is coming. At that moment, the glass of Lori's watch shatters, and the time freezes at 7:06. Lori realizes it signifies the 6th hour and 66 minutes, deepening her unease. As Lori sits in her office, disturbed by these events, a raven crashes into her window and passes away, further unsettling her. Meanwhile, Barrow, on his way back to his cell after praying, hears Molly calling out to him for help. A Bible falls from his hands, and Molly's voice urges him to do what is right. Barrow notices his watch is also stuck at 7:06. He picks up the Bible and leaves, while Molly begins to laugh ominously, signaling the growing power of the darkness within her. The next morning, Lori enters Molly's room and is horrified to find her hanging upside down from the ceiling. Terrified, Lori calls out to her, and Molly suddenly opens her eyes, causing Lori to be flung into the air and fall to the ground. Screaming for help, Lori is assisted by 2 guards who rush in and restrain Molly, tying her to the bed. The demon taunts that he is coming, and Barrow abruptly wakes up in his cell, sensing the disturbance. Lori approaches Barrow, pleading for his help, but he refuses, reminding her that he is no longer a priest. Lori insists that unexplainable and terrifying events are unfolding, prompting Barrow to suggest they talk elsewhere. Once outside, Lori explains that there are 2 types of exorcism: solemn, which requires church approval, and unofficial, which can be performed by a layperson. She reveals that due to lawsuits and negative media attention, the Roman Catholic Church no longer trains priests in exorcism, leaving only 17 trained exorcists in all of America, including Barrow. Of those 17, Barrow is the only one with actual experience in performing an exorcism. Lori urges him to act quickly, promising to secure his release from the asylum in return. As they talk, Barrow notices a large number of lifeless ravens scattered around. Lori explains that this happened the previous evening at 7:06 p.m., the same time all the clocks and watches stopped. Their conversation is interrupted by Janet, who is standing outside a window, screaming how he is here and his time is near. Before anyone can react, Janet jumps to her demise, leaving Barrow and Lori deeply shaken. Barrow decides to confront Molly, who is now fully possessed by the demon. The demon mocks Barrow, speaking in cryptic Bible verses and ridiculing scripture. When Barrow insists on speaking to Molly, the demon taunts him, asking if he wants to help her, like he helped the others. The demon then mimics the voice of the pregnant woman's husband, accusing Barrow of being a failure. For a brief moment, Molly regains control and pleads for Barrow's help, but the demon quickly takes over again, laughing maniacally. Barrow defiantly tells the demon that Molly is stronger than he thinks, and vows to save her. The demon responds with an ear-piercing scream, forcing Barrow to leave the room. Outside, Barrow discusses Molly's case with Laurie, who reveals that Molly was an average student until her 18th birthday, after which she excelled academically and professionally, becoming a partner at her firm by the age of 24. Laurie suggests that it seems as though someone or something has been aiding her all along, hinting at the dark forces at play. The next day, Barrow confides in Davies, sharing everything that has happened. Davies listens intently and encourages Barrow to help Molly, handing him his clerical attire and the necessary items for the exorcism. Barrow prepares himself, spraying holy water outside Molly's room before entering. Inside, he continues to sprinkle holy water, which visibly agitates the demon. Before beginning the exorcism, Barrow pours holy water on Molly and starts reciting the rites. The demon attempts to seduce and distract him, even taking on the form of the pregnant woman Barrow failed to save earlier. However, Barrow remains resolute, declaring that the demon cannot fool him again. As Barrow continues the exorcism, he tries to press a cross against the demon's face, but the demon bites his hand, causing severe injury. Barrow manages to free himself and notices strange symbols forming and disappearing on Molly's forehead. Undeterred, he presses the cross against her face again, causing her skin to burn. In retaliation, the demon spits blood on Barrow's face. Barrow retreats to the washroom to clean himself and bandage his wounded hand. When he looks out the window, he sees a group of people staring up at him ominously. Returning to Molly's room, Barrow resumes the exorcism. As he sprinkles more holy water, he commands the demon to leave Molly's body. Enraged, the demon begins hurling objects around the room and then starts choking Barrow while attempting to uproot the bed from the floor. Barrow grabs a cross from the wall and continues the exorcism, but the demon roars that he is here, forcing Barrow to retreat from the room. Later, Laurie approaches Barrow, encouraging him to believe in himself and Molly. The next day, Barrow returns to perform the exorcism. The demon taunts him, declaring that today is the day. 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days since Molly became impregnated with his spirit. Barrow shows the demon the cochon box, but the demon responds by reciting Bible verses, mockingly. Barrow declares that he will cast the demon out in the name of Christ and send it into the swine. As Barrow recites the rites, the demon, now at its peak strength, breaks free and begins levitating. However, a swarm of insects suddenly pours out of Molly's mouth and into the cochon box. Molly collapses onto the bed, and Barrow quickly seals the box, placing it in a container filled with holy water. He checks on Molly, who now appears normal, and helps her out of the room. The next day, Barrow visits Molly, who thanks him for saving her. However, as he leaves, he notices the other patients staring at him in a strange and unsettling manner, leaving him deeply uneasy. Molly also notices the patients in the ward staring at her with the same unsettling intensity as they did at Barrow. Meanwhile, Barrow returns the sealed container to Davies, who places it in his basement for safekeeping. As Barrow looks around, he notices Davies' book on Satanism and realizes that the symbols on its cover match the letters that had appeared on Molly's forehead during the exorcism. Davies explains that this is related to Leviathan, the 4th book of the Satanic Bible, which prophesies that the Antichrist will be born after the worst sin, matricide, is committed against the mother of the devil. Alarmed, Barrow demands to see the cochon box, but when they open the container, they find that the box has been replaced with a large stone. Before Barrow can react, Davies strikes him, knocking him unconscious. Barrow wakes up locked in a room within the asylum, where he witnesses a patient in the adjacent room and himself. To his horror, he realizes the room is filled with other deceased patients. Meanwhile, Laurie arrives at the asylum and discovers that the entire hospital is eerily empty. She goes to her office to retrieve her phone, but as she enters, the phone rings. A chilling voice on the other end declares that someone is coming, leaving Laurie terrified and uncertain of what awaits. A guard approaches Laurie, but she immediately notices something is off about him. Meanwhile, an orderly, wielding a gun, forces Barrow to accompany him to witness a birth ritual. In the basement, Davies prepares the ceremony with numerous satanic cult members gathered to observe the sacrifice of Molly. The guard leads Laurie to a ward filled with corpses and attempts to take her out, but she defends herself by attacking him with scissors. She then spots another guard escorting Barrow away. Barrow and the orderly arrive at the underground chamber, where Davies reveals that Barrow is the father of the devil, having unknowingly facilitated the demon's arrival through an unholy ritual. Just as Davies is about to sacrifice Molly, Laurie intervenes, attacking him in the abdomen. In the chaos, Davies drops the box, releasing a swarm of insects that attack the cult members. Seizing the opportunity, Molly injures Davies. Barrow, Dr. Hawthorne, and Molly manage to escape, with Barrow reassuring Molly of her safety as she's taken away in an ambulance. In the final scene, one of the insects flies into a passing school bus and crawls toward an isolated girl sitting at the back. It nears her ear just as the screen fades to black.